Good afternoon, and I extend some very warm greetings from what is right now a very, very cold state of Michigan. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person this afternoon, but as some of you may know, I had back surgery just a few weeks ago, and I'm afraid that right now travel wouldn't be very comfortable. And speaking of traveling, I certainly hope that by the time you see this video, those of you that have traveled to Boston will have some opportunity to get the snow melting so that you can enjoy that wonderful and very beautiful city. Let me begin by thanking the members of the board of the Community College Baccalaureate Association for selecting me to receive this year's Pioneer Award. To be honest, I never really thought of myself as a pioneer. But I am very flattered by that term and delighted that you would think of me in that way. Beth and Mike told me that I could take a few minutes to talk about university centers and in particular the Macomb University Center. And I know that some of the statistics have already been shared with you. Certainly the Macomb University Center has received wide recognition, been written up in a number of publications. Soon to celebrate its 25th anniversary. But what has not been as well documented is the story as to where the idea came from. So what I'd like to do is to start out by telling you a little bit about the Macomb University Center today, but more importantly to tell you about the background of how that idea became a reality. Today, what started out as a single building, freestanding building, now is a four-building complex, occupies some 200,000 square feet. What started out with 3 partner institutions has now grown to 12 partner institutions. What started out as a center offering 11 undergraduate programs now offers some 90 programs, ranging from undergraduate programs through postgraduate and doctoral degrees. What might be the most unique aspect of the Macomb University Center is that it is also home to a complete branch campus of the Michigan State University Medical School. Students enrolled in the medical school can spend all 4 years there, completing all of their classroom training, only having to leave the University Center to do their clinical experiences. This spring, the 3rd class of 50 physicians will graduate from that branch campus, entering their internships and residencies. And what we find to be most heartwarming about that is the majority of those students indicate that they plan to come back to establish their practices in the community once they finish their training. So all in all, the growth has been phenomenal over a 25-year period, with some 4,000 plus course enrollments now taking place each and every term. But where did this come from? What gave rise to the idea? Some of you may be old enough to remember the recession that hit this country in the early 1980s. Certainly states like Michigan, that are manufacturing-based states, were very, very hard hit. But we're used to that. Manufacturing states went through these repeated boom and bust cycles. And the strategy for dealing with a recession was to simply wait it out. That if you waited long enough, sooner or later the clouds of recession would pass, and sooner or later the jobs would return. But what was different about the recession of the early 1980s is that experts were projecting that the jobs simply wouldn't come back. What they were saying is that because primarily of emerging technologies, people who used to put their backs into their work were soon going to be asked to put their brains into the work. Or to put it differently, production workers were going to give way to what was called knowledge workers. When communities tried to show themselves ready for this new knowledge age, or information age as it's been called, instead of touting the skills that their workforce possessed, what they began to do was to celebrate the degrees that the population had attained. And one of the key metrics for economic competitiveness became the percentage of the population within a given region holding a 4-year degree or higher. Well, typically manufacturing states like Michigan, and more importantly manufacturing regions or counties like Macomb, did not have as high of a percentage of degree holders as they had skilled workers. And if the experts were correct, that is, that if degrees were going to become the new metric for economic competitiveness, then something had to be done to try to increase the level of baccalaureate degree holders within our region, within our county. The 1980s also gave rise to another model of economic development, and that is where communities would offer, as an incentive to attract businesses, they would offer some infrastructure opportunities. For example, a county might pave a roadway, or they might provide, the state might provide a special new access or ingress-egress ramp to an interstate highway. But the idea was almost a field of dreams concept, and that is, if we build it, will you come? As all presidents do, I would give speeches from time to time in the community, and as this new knowledge age emerged, one of the questions that I was asked repeatedly is, when is Macomb going to become a four-year school? And I would carefully explain why that probably wasn't going to happen, how the state couldn't afford yet another four-year institution, but that didn't stop the questions from coming. What I soon realized was, if a four-year institution announced plans to put a full branch campus in our community, I would probably never get asked that question again. Because while everybody might want to root for the hometown college, if you will, they were less concerned about Macomb becoming a four-year school than they were with how do I get more convenient access to baccalaureate degree opportunities. With that in mind, we began to look at this in a whole new way. I began to talk to my university counterparts and basically said, what would it take to have you bring more program opportunities into our community? And the answer came back the same all the time. We just don't have the money to build the facilities. So following that field of dreams opportunity, that field of dreams model, I basically said, if we could find a way to provide first-rate facilities to house your programs, would you bring them to Macomb County? And from at least 3 partners initially, the answer was a resounding yes. And that was born the University Center model. The idea of having multiple providers bring certain programs into the community, into facilities that were provided locally, and in our case through the community college. The other thing we did, borrowing from the newly emerging economic development models, is we began to learn what the auto industry also had to learn the hard way. The old auto industry would design cars and build cars and then try to find some way to sell those cars to the public. What the auto industry and many other corporations soon learned is that the focus had to be placed on the customers. That is, we needed to build what they wanted, not build what we wanted and then try to have people be convinced to buy them. So to prepare for the University Center concept, what we did was we went back over a 10-year period of time. We looked at data regarding our transfer students. We looked at which institutions they transferred to in largest numbers, and then went inside of that and said, and which programs do they take in greatest numbers? Armed with that consumer-driven, student-driven information, we then appealed to those institutions to bring those programs into the University Center. This model was so new at the time that nobody knew what to call it. The Chronicle of Higher Education came out to do a story on the University Center as it was being built a year or so before it opened. And not knowing what to call it, they actually referred to it as a higher education mall. I'm not sure we liked that. We eventually came up with the term University Center, and it not only stuck here, but it's been used now, I think, in common language among community colleges around the country. So to make a long story short, the Macomb plan, if you will, to expand a community's access to higher education was really an economic development model of building facilities as an incentive to bring the providers of those programs into the community, and then targeting the programs that were most preferred by the customers, by our students. Has it worked? It worked incredibly well. The Chronicle of Higher Education asked me what I would define as success when the center opened. I said if we could have some 500 students, I would be thrilled. The center actually opened in the fall of 1991 to nearly 900 students and has grown continually since that time. And as I said, now experiencing some 4,000 plus course enrollments every term. It's been quite a success. I'd like to conclude my remarks by sharing with you something which is really kind of meaningful to me. I mentioned my back surgery. I was under a type of what I call house arrest for the first 2 weeks following surgery. I literally was told not to leave the house. That can get a little boring, but I used the time to go through some things that I hadn't looked at in a long time. And some of that was some keepsakes that came from my family down several generations. And one of the things I found in there was a ring, a rather tiny ring. And it's a college ring from a graduate from what was called at the time, Michigan State Normal College. Some background there is that Michigan State Normal College began in 1849 as Michigan State Normal School, which was exclusively focused on teacher preparation. At that time, the preparation to be a teacher was not a four-year degree. But about the turn of the century, toward 1900, the preferred credential became the four-year degree, and Michigan Normal School in 1899 changed its name to Michigan State Normal College. That, in turn, became Eastern Michigan University. There are other examples of institutions starting with very focused missions that then went on to great things. In Michigan, we have Michigan Agricultural College becoming Michigan State University, and I'm sure those of you can tell us examples from your own states as to how your institutions of higher education have expanded. We seem to have always celebrated the expansion of the mission of the four-year schools, but there are people who would quickly criticize any desire to expand the mission of the two-year schools. In my opinion, that's just dead wrong. When an institution expands its thinking and expands its mission to serve emerging educational needs, it is a cause to be celebrated, not criticized. And I would hope that that is done in increasing measure when it comes to the thoughtfulness and the future-focused nature of our nation's community colleges. Let me close by saying simply this. When I was a student in elementary school, we were studying how the Wild West was tamed and how the nation expanded. We talked a lot about pioneers. And I remember a teacher telling me that there were no more pioneers, that that was a dying breed, that the pioneers had left and now had all been replaced by the folks who had followed. I guess to be recognized today as a pioneer maybe proves that teacher to be wrong, and I'd also like to believe that that teacher would be wrong, because sitting in this room today are a lot of others who in turn will be pioneers as educational institutions continue to focus on emerging needs and expand their mission appropriately. Thank you again for selecting me to receive this award. It is really a very high honor. I want to thank my friends in higher education. I've been out of the field now for about 6 years, and I miss many of you very, very much, and I continue to congratulate you on the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you.